Welcome to another Acts Church podcast. Glad you're with us. If you're listening on our new channel, welcome. If you're not, check out our new channel. It's Acts Church Podcast as well as Acts Church Sermons. We have split it in two. We used to have them both on the same channel. Now we have Dose. We have two. So yeah, check them out.
It's very international of you. Have we? Do they know where to find these on iTunes? You would go to what? Acts Church Podcast.
Yeah, any place you're getting your podcast from, it's going to be Acts Church Podcast. The old channel you'll notice has changed from Acts Church Podcast to Acts Church Podcast and Sermons, and now we have another channel that is Acts Church Podcast and another channel that is Acts Church Sermons, and the old channel will phase out over the course of the next year or so.
So we'll stop posting on that channel over time.
Yep.
And be posting on either Acts Church Podcast or Acts Church Sermons. So you should go to those.
Subscribe.
Pause right now. Go to those. You're probably on that right now. If you're listening to this, maybe, or you're on your whatever, wherever you get your podcasts, go subscribe to those so that you get those weekly, that they'll come and give you a little message pop up so that you can do your favorite thing, which is, of course, listening to either Acts Church Podcast or Acts Church Sermons. So, yeah.
We're probably going to start up another kind of branch of our podcast called Contemplate, which for those of you who are familiar with our past Contemplate, it won't quite be that. It might be similar, but it's going to be more like a broken up bite-sized version of the sermons,
right,
basically. So you can listen to them over the course of a drive, probably, as opposed to over the course of an hour. Right.
Ron Hagelgans, who is on staff here, does editing and so on of some of the sermons. He's going to edit those into more of like what you would hear if you were on one of the Christian radio stations listening to sermon content, so breaking those 60-minute sermons up into, 3 20-minute pieces,
right,
with kind of a beginning and an end that sort of lead in. You'll see what it's like. If you like that rather than listening to a whole sermon, that's great. I think for some people it'll be better. Mm-hmm. And for some people, they'd rather just listen to the whole thing. And for some people, they'd rather not listen at all.
And they don't hear this anyway.
Right, and you'll never hear this, so don't worry about it. Anyway.
Well, we're coming up with more options. We're trying to bolster our podcasting game, I guess, as the kids would say.
The podcasting game is strong here at Acts Church, or getting stronger, although we did miss last week. We're outside today. It's January, what is it, 29th?
It's the 30th.
Is it the 30th? Okay. Yeah, it's the 30th. January 30th. We're in the Northwest. It's like negative 18,000 degrees all through the Midwest. But here, it's a balmy 49, 50 degrees. It's sunny. You can see the mountains. For those of you in other parts of the country where it's cold, stay warm. I'm sorry you're having to deal with that. But hey, it gives you more time to listen to podcasts.
It's not even windy here. Yesterday it was windy, but today
it's not windy. It's beautiful.
Quiet.
It's sunny. I went out and played disc golf today because that's fun.
I flew my drone.
Hunter flew his drone, so that's good. It's
a little bit fun.
The sun's out. You can see the mountains. For those of you who have never been to the Northwest, it is absolutely gorgeous when it's sunny. A lot of the time in the winter, we spend with it being very cloudy. Whenever you watch a movie about Seattle or Portland, it's always raining because people just assume it's always raining here. And for those of you who are thinking about moving here, it's always raining here. Don't come.
But this winter,
we don't want to pay any more for our homes than we already have to pay. But yeah, this winter's been okay. It hasn't been that bad.
Yeah.
And
I was driving across the 205 bridge north this morning from Portland, and I could see Mount St. Helens.
Yeah.
Well, I could see the whole gorge, but I could see Mount St. Helens ahead of me, which kind of looks like a mountain with like top cut off, because it is a mountain with a top cut off.
Blown off, actually.
Right. They came
little
through with a
before your
knife.
time.
Just about 14 years before my time.
Mm-hmm.
And then to my right, I could see Mount Hood. It was a nice drive.
Yeah, it's going over the 205 bridge and just being able to look up the gorge and see Mount Hood and see the gorge. And of course, when you can see Mount St. Helens too,
or driving down 14 when I'm coming to church on Sunday mornings and it's a clear morning, driving down Highway 14. I don't know if you probably don't do that.
I've done it many times. It is probably one of the best views that we get in this county.
It's like lined up perfectly. You have like trees 200 feet up on both sides of you, and then just like a clearing straight ahead of you from the highway of Mount Hood. It's perfect.
And you get to see Mount Hood. It looks bigger on that drive than it probably does almost anywhere else until you literally get to the mountain.
Right.
It just looks huge
because it's you're on it.
It just looks huge. It's just it's amazing. It's awesome, and just the handiwork of God and the beautiful things that He's made. And it actually amazes me. And this is not what the podcast is about today, but it amazes me how many people live here, recognize the incredible design and beauty of nature, and yet decide to worship nature instead of worshiping God.
I mean, it's not like they came up with that. They're not the first ones to do that. But.
No, it's an old form of paganism. It's been around for a long time. Again, not what the podcast is about today. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point. Although it's not totally outside of what we want to talk about, because one of the things that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks in the sermons and the messages in church are these dualisms, one of which is this body-soul dualism, right? This separation between the soul, spirit, and the body. And paganism and other nature worshiping practices really are similar. If you go to Romans 1 and you see where God says, look, what's known about God is known, right? You can know it. It's in your heart. You can see it in nature. Everything that there is about God, including His Godhead, can be seen from what has been made. And yet we suppress the truth in unrighteousness and decide to worship the creature rather than the Creator, right? And so there's this whole distinction of, hey, we have, because we have not wanted to bend the knee, because we have not wanted to submit to God, we've decided that we will create for ourselves. And of course, this has taken many forms. Idolatry, literally like making idols, chopping down a tree, half of it you burn to keep warm, the other half you worship and say, this is my God. That kind of nonsense. Excuse me. We'll cut that out or not. That kind of nonsense has always been going on. And what we've done is we've done a similar thing where we've broken ourselves up as humans, as persons, into these different categories, which we are body, soul, spirit, but that's a united whole. We've said, no, the body is something separate. It's basically a robot. It's a sack of meat. It's whatever. And who you are is really what is in the soul spirit part of you that just controls the body as some sort of automaton, some sort of puppet. And so out of that, we have seen all kinds of ways for us to justify different evils like abortion, like sexual immorality in all its forms, because we basically say we can do what we want with the body.
Now, I was just thinking about this, and I don't know if it's just me, but what does the term dualism mean? Like, I think I make an assumption about what it means, but I don't know if I've ever actually...
I'm considering whether to just make you tell me what your assumption is, but I'll tell you what dualism is. So a dualism, and if you listen to the sermon from 2 weeks ago, I kind of walk through what dualisms are, but you're basically taking something that's not necessarily divided and dividing it. Right. So you're making a distinction where a distinction doesn't really exist.
Right. Okay.
So you have a mind-body dualism. We talked about sacred secular dualism, which is a different thing. Fact-value dualism. Fact-value may be the easiest one to express it, where we say certain things are true and those are facts, and other things are, or certain things are objectively true, like there's a tree out here that we can both look at. That's objectively true. We can go see it, we can smell it. I suppose we could taste it, we can feel it.
While other things are subjective values.
Well, your values, things like that you love me, which of course you do, is not really true. That's just something inside your own head. It's not really true. It's not really objective like the tree.
Hamburgers.
Or you love hamburgers. Sure. Well, probably more than you love me. Which
depends on the day.
Which is a problem. I've bought you many hamburgers, so
that's true. It just goes right back to I'm worshiping the hamburger instead of the one who bought it.
That's right. That's exactly right. You've got your love aimed in the wrong direction, Hunter. But the fact that you love your mother, for instance, the fact value dualism or dichotomy, you can use either word, would say that is not true. That's just a subjective feeling that exists inside your own brain and has no truth outside of that. As where what we would say as believers is both of those things are facts. They're both truths. There's no difference between the kind of truth that involves your love for your mother and the kind of truth that involves that tree. They're both real, objectively real. And so we make a dichotomy or a dualism when we split apart things and categorize them separately when they're not different kinds of things.
So it's a logical fallacy.
It is. If the there could be a dualism that's real, right? Where things really are separated. Okay? So you could have a dualism that separates things that should be separate, and that kind of a dualism would be true.
Right.
But a dualism in the sense that we're talking about are dualisms that are not true. So in this case, we're talking about mind-body dualism. The body and the mind are not an integrated whole. They're rather, you have a body which is really not you. That's not who you are. It's not part of you as a person. Hunter is not a body. Hunter is only a soul spirit. And so really and you see lots of religions where really the goal is for your spirit and soul to leave the body and become some sort of gossamer floating ghost that, experiences the real or the true and leaves the body, which is just this physical nonsense, or even some people would say an evil thing, leaves that aside. That is not Christianity, though. God created man in his own image and likeness and created him physical from the beginning, before sin. Sounds like we got a flock of geese above us. I imagine you'll probably be able to hear that. One of the wonderful things about recording these outside, I hope that they don't leave anything, drop anything on us on their way.
We've got some covering.
Yeah. Well, they could have a little angle and make that thing work through. So we're good. So the idea is, be released from the body, become one with God, or whatever, that type of a thing. It's just not Christian. There's nothing Christian about that. Christianity says God made man and woman in his image and likeness and made them physical. Christianity says Jesus Christ rose from the dead bodily, not as a spirit, but bodily rose from the dead and ate fish and walked and talked and did the things that you do in a body. And so that's the Christian concept. When we split those things apart and say the body is not who we are, it becomes much easier to justify things like abortion and say, oh, a baby inside a womb, an unborn child, is just a body, until we say it's a person. And that personhood can come at some point. Or I can have sex with whoever I want because it's just my body touching their body. Wow, there's those geese again. It's just my body touching their body. And therefore, it's nothing. We're not connecting our personhood to that. It's not me and them having sex. It's just my body touching their body, right?
We're both above that. We're okay.
Right. That's the hookup culture is based on that, right? I'm not going to emotionally attach to this person. I don't even care if we talk or know who each other is. We're just going to engage in this physical act with our physical bodies, and that act is essentially meaningless. It's just making these meat sacks feel good for a minute, and then we get on with our business.
It's just entertainment.
It's entertainment, essentially. It's not. There's nothing to it.
Which, then I would say, is entertainment just. I think we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but entertainment. Okay, so not that I'm saying this, but just for the sake of argument. Okay,
you are saying it.
I know. For the sake of that argument. Okay, it's just entertainment. Does that mean it doesn't matter? Does that mean it doesn't affect you?
Well, that's what they would say.
Right.
Their point is, because there is a pure separation between body and soul spirit, or just let's say body and person, because they consider soul spirit to be their personhood. Yeah. A pure materialist, an atheistic materialist, someone who believes that everything happened by chance, Darwinian evolution, the whole 9 yards, would say that personhood isn't even necessarily a real concept, but to the extent that it is, it involves the thoughts that happen inside your brain, but has nothing to do with the rest of it. They would really be a pure materialist, would really be a body person. There'd be no dualism at all. You are just a body. Nothing you do really matters.
Right.
It only matters in the sense that you want to make it have meaning to yourself.
Right.
Totally different. Issue.
I'd be curious to see a poll of how many people would land in each camp, but I would guess right now our society is about split 50-50 on that.
I don't think that very many people, even materialistic atheists, actually live out or walk through their life thinking of themselves as a meaningless mass of cells. I think that that's where their philosophy clearly leads, and atheistic philosophers will admit that that's true.
Right.
But they'll also say, but I can't live like that.
Right.
You take like Dawkins says, I don't cheat on my wife, not because there's any moral reason, because there's no real such thing as morality, but I just can't do it. I mean, and so you can't live when you have a philosophy that you can't live consistently with. You might want to check into whether it's true. But nevertheless, and of course, if atheism is true, materialistic atheism, and you're just a clump of cells, you only believe that atheism is true because that clump of cells has determined that you will believe that. So therefore, you have to question whether what you believe is true because you only believe it because you're forced to believe it. So you got all kinds of issues there. I don't want to walk through all that. Yeah. We could have a lot of fun with that, but I don't want to do that. I want to stay with where I think most people are, Christian and non-Christian. Most religions, most people, I think, walk through life holding some level of this mind-body dualism because it's become so prominent. It's been around for a long time. Plato, back in 400 BC, thereabouts, 400 BC, was talking about life and reality in these kinds of terms. And Descartes in the 1600s, what we would call the modern era, as philosophers, we call it the modern era. Most people wouldn't say modern mean recent, but that's actually not what the modern era is. We're in the postmodern era philosophically. Right. I'm not going to go into all that, but Descartes really took this idea of dualism. In his mind, he was trying to effect a compromise between, the church and the realm of science and whatever. He was actually a Christian, but it was a bad compromise. It didn't work. It wasn't logically sound. Nevertheless, it became very popular. And it's been very popular for thousands of years, really, because if you can separate the body from the self, you can justify all kinds of what we would call lusts and desires of the body
without compromising
without a moral aspect to them, right? And so when the Romans were going around, buying slaves and using them for sex or doing all kinds of sexually, grotesque things, they were able to just say, well, it's just the body, and the body's evil anyway, and it's meaningless and whatever. This isn't really myself. And of course, we do the same thing today, right? And so that's where we are. And so I'm gonna ask you a couple things, and I don't know what your experience would be with this, because very few people understand. This is the problem with worldview. Most people catch it like you catch a cold, or in Washington State right now, measles, which apparently we're like on the national news in Clark County. We're in Clark County, Washington here, which is like epicenter of the measles, because people have not vaccinated their children as much here in this area, and so it's gotten a chance to sort of have an outbreak. 30-something cases. I don't know how many. Now there's one in New York and one in Hawaii, I think. And anyway. So you catch it. You don't think through it. You just catch it. And I think because this is the philosophy that is most prevalent and prominent in most of the things we watch, most of the music we hear, most of the way that we talk, every sex education class, all those kinds of things, it's underlying all of that. You just catch it. And so the way that you have to recognize it when you're looking for it is you can't recognize it by people having come up to you in the past and been like, Hunter, I think that our bodies and our minds are separate, and there's a Cartesian dualism that affects. Right. They're not going to say it like that. Instead, you have to look through the way that they live and the way that they talk in general to see it. And so I'll ask you: you went to public school,
yeah?
Shadle
Park.
Shout out. I'm sure we have lots of
if
lots
we have
of
any
students
Park
from
listeners. Let me know.
I don't think Shadle Park is that
Shadle Park? Yeah,
Shadle Park.
SHADLE.
All right, Shadle Park listeners, comment below. Shout out to Shadle Park. But if you are in public school these days, I don't know. Of course, this would have been 6-7 years ago that you were in high school.
Yeah, 6 years ago I graduated.
Wow, you're just getting so old.
I know.
It's just you're just growing up so fast. The fact is that you're going to pick this up strongly, and so I'm wondering whether it's sex education class or whether it's just the way that that your friends talked about it, or your friends who were engaging in sexually immoral acts and so on, which I know no high schooler would ever do, but no. Let's assume that it probably happened. Did you see this? Did you see sort of sex as something that was, or abortion as something that was talked about as though it didn't really have real moral implications?
I think I had a pretty healthy circle around me. I think I had a pretty healthy group of friends. Even those who weren't Christians themselves had fairly Christian influenced values. So no, I mean, I'm sure there was more of it than I knew. I'm sure my friends weren't like, let's go tell the pastor's son about all of our sexual immorality, or, about sleeping with each other.
My friends did, and I was a pastor's son.
Well, yeah, but it sounds like we were different in high school.
Try to shame me on the podcast?
No, this is what you say.
This is terrible.
You make fun of me. I'm
going to cry myself to sleep tonight.
Good.
Go ahead.
And so I didn't see a ton of it. I mean, I knew it was going on sometimes, but for the most part, I think it was still taboo to an extent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Okay.
So what you're basically saying is you weren't around very many people who either were engaging in acts where they would use this type of thing to justify them, or they weren't telling you about it.
Yeah, I either wasn't close enough to them that I would be hearing about it,
Okay.
or they purposely were not telling me about it. So,
well, let me ask you. Even growing up in the church, even growing up as a Christian and hearing, certainly you heard sexual immorality is bad. You shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. All those kinds of like rules.
Uh-huh.
But did you ever feel like you had satisfactory explanations for why? And did you ever struggle with this, or after we've been talking about it, do you recognize any of this in your own self as that's creeped into your own worldview?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when we talk about homosexuality, like I'm like it wasn't very hard for me to understand even biologically why sex is designed for marriage, because like you were talking about in your sermon on Sunday, there's hormones that get released through that bond you to that person, and I had that explained to me. I think I had like my what was the class called? Like it was kind of like a home ec class. We had a different name for it, but
home sex?
No.
Oh, okay.
It was life skills. That's what it was called.
I suppose it's a life skill. All right.
Oh no. Anyway, so we did like baking and like finances and stuff like that, and then we had a sex education part, and I'm assuming my teacher, Mrs. Rasmussen was her name.
Shout out to Miss Rasmussen.
Yeah. I know she listens to this.
Home ec, whatever class. Yeah, for sure she does.
At Glover Middle School.
Okay.
I don't know if she's still there or not, but I could look it up.
Probably. You're pretty young.
Hey, yeah. She explained how there was like even if you don't buy any of this Christian morality stuff, even if you're completely against all that, there are actual biological things happening in your body that are bonding you to that person that is going to make it very mentally damaging to you to have numerous sexual partners before you reach an age of marriage, and after that age, of course. But anyway, she was talking to middle schoolers. So.
That's interesting because that is not the primary message that's going out these days in school.
I don't know how I got through public school with such very
I'm guessing that it was that you grew up in a pretty conservative area. I mean, the other conversations we've had on the podcast suggest to me that Spokane, which is, as far as I can tell, in the middle of nowhere. It's a decent sized city.
It's a small patch of somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a decent sized city, but it's not really surrounded by much metropolitan.
No.
The influences on it. It's far enough away from, say, Seattle and Portland that it's probably more influenced by Midwestern ethic than it is by, a Seattle, Portland ethic.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely just barely, I'm not even sure which way Spokane County votes, whether they vote liberal or conservative on most issues, but it's definitely not overwhelming. It's not like it was Texas or anything like that. It wasn't super conservative.
Yeah. It depends where you are in Texas. My brother lives in Austin, and that's about like Portland. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's the only place in Texas I know of that's like that. I see. Different issue, but I'm just guessing that
it was
coastal?
Long
enough. No.
Okay. I don't know Texas.
It's very big.
Houston is coastal.
Yes.
Okay.
Houston
and Austin are similar words in my brain.
Yeah, and I think Houston's 3 hours from Austin. I don't know. Somebody comment.
Give us a geography lesson.
Fact is that we've rapidly moved. So even junior high, which would have been like 10 years ago for you, what are you, 24?
Yeah.
So yeah, about 10 years ago. Even in the last 10 years, things have moved relatively rapidly in this area, where I don't think you're going to find the common way of people explaining sex education in the way that you're talking about. In fact, it's definitely moved towards a body soul dichotomy, body soul dualism mindset. I have children. They've been in public school.
Yeah.
What they were telling them was not what you just heard.
Right. Well, I will say, probably the closest thing to like a negative like sexual education experience I had in the public school system was that. I don't even know if I describe it as this, but it was just very like clinical, I guess. Like they didn't. I think I probably started having sex ed classes in third grade. No, second grade. I remember being in second grade,
wow,
having like just like a week of like where they'd split up the guys and the girls, and we'd have like a sexual education course. And although they called it human growth and development, I remember that now.
That seems very young.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it at the time, but like now thinking back, I'm like, I was like a toddler. I mean, I wasn't, but when I look at second graders now,
it's like 7 years old,
right?
It's young.
But it was very like a biology class, you know. It was more like that. So I guess,
and that's really and that actually is more of what you'll see is a very clinical. It's a good word, very clinical. In other words, dealing with the body and nothing else. Here's how you have sex. Here's what sex looks like. Here's your parts. Here's your anatomy. Here's a condom. This is how you use a condom. Here's this, but nothing to deal with what you were talking about, which is this is going to affect you as a person. Like this is going to affect you. There's real reasons for those.
We had an abstinence group come into I can't remember what they had, like an acronym that ended in A. But they were like a pure abstinence movement where like 4 or 5 high schoolers came to our middle school and were like, we're all either committed to abstinence or like recommitted to abstinence, and like they gave like their like testimonies on why, and I was like, at the time I was just like, oh cool, that, like this matches what I hear at church, but now it's weird.
And I think probably there's still abstinence groups out there who probably get into some schools, and it depends where you are in the country and lots of things, but the wave is moving in the direction of a very clinical approach, not dealing with the emotions of it, more of a you should do what you want. You should experiment to find out who you are, which is a different issue. And we'll talk about that later. So I don't want to go too far down the identity issue. But it's definitely more of taking things from a perspective of this is your body. This is how you use your body. This is what your body does, without addressing the body as the person.
Right.
And when you do that, it just becomes so much easier to start thinking about yourself as a dualistic being. So I'm me. The me is not my body, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, and you can walk through some examples. If you got your arm cut off, you go to war, or you in an accident or whatever, and you had your arm cut off, would you stop being you?
Right.
No, you wouldn't. You'd still be you, right? Everything that you know about who you are would still be true. Now, but in some ways, you wouldn't be, right?
Right. People have like pretty serious emotional trauma from losing, even when it's not like a dramatic like war type of situation, like.
Yeah, losing parts of your body is going to affect you in a pretty severe way,
right? Because
it is you. Because you are your body. When your body stops working, you go sleepy,
right?
Wake up.
Yeah.
It's done. And so now, of course, as believers, we understand what happens in that moment. We understand the resurrection of the dead, bodily resurrection, that we're all going to be made new, and so on. That's a different issue. But you will be bodily resurrected. You will not be resurrected just as a soul or soul spirit. You will be body, soul, spirit. That is the plan for God in redeeming the world. And so, and you'll be raised to eternal life or to eternal death, essentially. The second death. That's, theologically or what we understand biblically, that's what's going to happen. But I think that a lot of people don't see it that way and do not see their body as part of who they are as a person. It's a thing to care for. It's a thing. Sometimes it's even a thing to worship. People worship exercise. People worship sex. People worship, by their actions, they show that those are the most important things in their life, but they still see their body as separate from who they are. Mm-hmm. We're going to get into things like the transgender movement, issues like that, where you can see that you couldn't find a more clear example of body, soul, spirit dualism than saying literally my body is not who I am. I not only is it that my gender exists not in my body, mm-hmm. but in my feelings, in my mind, my soul, my spirit, that type of thing. And so that I can even have a gender that's different than the body that I have. My personhood is so separated that the fact that I'm born with as a particular gender is meaningless.
Right. I don't know why I never put that idea together with, I never put those two ideas, that dualism together with transgenderism. I never put those two ideas together.
I think it's probably the clearest example.
Yeah.
It's the clearest example that you have. You have the example in abortion where you get to call the baby, because now we know that it's a baby from conception,
right? But
we now basically will refer to it as body and not person, not fully person.
Right.
We have it in sex where we say it's not me. Mm-hmm. At my deepest center, it's not me who's engaging in these sexually immoral acts. This is something that I do with my body mm-hmm. to make my body feel good, and it doesn't have effects on me as a person.
Right.
And then, of course, in transgenderism, homosexuality, some of the other particular issues that exist, you're really seeing it at its fullest extent. I am not my body. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, as we talk through and walk through this, I think what should be the result is that most people will recognize that there's some level of mind-body dualism that exists in their own worldview. Mm-hmm. That to some extent they have bought into this. I think before these issues were brought to my attention, I think I probably did see a divided person. I think I probably did, at least at some areas of my life, see this mind-body dualism at work in the way that I thought about things. And it really does affect the way you think about a lot of things.
Right. Well, and maybe for you, I'm not talking about you, David. I'm talking about for people in general. Maybe it doesn't necessarily, maybe they already have a Christian upbringing that has taught them sexual morality, so it wasn't like an issue. But maybe you struggle with how you eat. It's just my body. I'm just trying to, I'll go pray a lot. I'll go read my Bible a lot. I'll go spend my time putting my mind on godly things, but it's just my body. I can eat however many Oreos I want. Speaking personally, I can eat however many Oreos and ice cream and all this junk food that I want. Just kind of putting off the significance of your body, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what you're bringing up about food and those kinds of things is important because body, soul dualism, right? Mind-body dualism does not just affect us when it comes to issues of sexuality or gender identity or those kinds of things, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk more about gender identity a little later, because I think that's a really important one for people. But the food thing is also important. And of course, all of these things have another side, which is to say, we can do mind-body dualism, and instead of using it as an opportunity to feed the flesh, we can use it as an opportunity to starve the flesh. And both have been ways that people have made mistakes, right? So we have a let's just say a history of what we'd call asceticism in Christianity. Asceticism is basically things where we deny the body. You see it in other religions as well, Hinduism, things like that. That holiness is found by essentially denying the body. There are guys who will, stand on one leg for 20 years. Or, sit in a certain position for, a year straight or whatever, things like that, thinking that by doing something that keeps the body from getting pleasure, that they're becoming more holy, which is essentially saying, I am ignoring my body so that I can be more spiritual, right? And so we see that even Christians have engaged in asceticism from time to time.
I think it can be easy to think that that's right because we have things like fasting. Where do you draw the line between asceticism and fasting?
Well, fasting can be an ascetic practice as opposed to a spiritual discipline. If you use it with the mindset of, I'm doing this because I'm trying to ignore my body because my body is unimportant, then it's asceticism. It's not. Right. It's no longer a spiritual discipline. That's saying I am holding something back from my body to remind me to focus myself on God.
Right.
I am going through a certain amount of pain. I'm going through a certain amount of giving up certain pleasures as an attempt to focus on prayer. So we even see it with sexuality. Paul says, look, a husband and a wife should not deny their bodies to each other. The husband's body belongs to the wife's body belongs to the husband for sex. I mean, he's not, we're the ones who are so prudish about this. Paul wasn't prudish about it. Look, you guys belong to each other for sex, and you should not deny sex to each other, except if together you decide to not have sex with each other for a time, right? Not forever, but for a time to what? Devote yourselves to prayer. So you're holding yourself back from sex with one another, which is a good thing. You're holding back that good thing in order to focus on God, not to focus on you being more spirit and less body.
Right.
That's not the point. Although some Christians have done this, and Paul speaks against. He's like, look, you're saying do not taste, do not touch, do not do this, and these things you're essentially using. But that's not the point, because God likes sex. God likes food. God likes stuff. God likes your body. He made your body. It's not we are not supposed to be denying ourselves the pleasures of life. Who's the guy out in Minnesota? John Piper. So he talks about Christian hedonism, right? The idea that we're supposed to be living these lives of joy. A believer is not supposed to be trying to find every possible way to avoid pleasure so that he can be or she can be more spiritual. Right. That is not in fact, you're not honoring God by saying the stuff that he made is not valuable, whether it's your body or the food that was made for you to bring you joy or sex or whatever. Instead, you're supposed to enjoy those things in the context that he's given them to you. So not Oreos and ice cream all day, and not sex outside of marriage, and not, whatever, because, and I'm not saying there's not a day where you could eat a lot of Oreos and ice cream. Okay. There's time for feasting and celebration and whatever. And if that's the way you do it, whatever. I mean, there's better food out there. We can talk about that later. Maybe we'll just do a podcast on the best food.
Right.
But these things are there for you. God wants you to enjoy them. God's made this earth, this day where the sun is in my face, and I can go and drive down 14 and look at Mount Hood. I should be enjoying all of that stuff. I shouldn't close my eyes so that I don't experience the joys that come because I want to be more spiritual. That's asceticism, and that is not a Christian practice. So for those of you who think that fasting or other ways that you hold yourself back or use self-control as a pure means to forget about the body, that is not the point. The point isn't to forget about the body. The point is to take certain things out of your life so that you can more directly focus on prayer, on God, on whatever. It's not because your body's bad. It's not because that pleasures aren't good. It's saying I'm foregoing this pleasure right now to focus on prayer, right? But your body is good. It was made, God made man and woman and said, this is very good. And we want to say, it's not good, it's bad, because sometimes I want to do things that are bad. Well, sure. In those cases, you should use self-control. If you're single and you're not married, you should not be having sex. Right. If you're tempted to have sex outside of the context of marriage between one man and one woman in a committed lifelong marriage, you should not do that. You should have self-control. But that's not asceticism. That's saying I want the joys that God has provided and has made in the context that he provided them for. So I don't know. Have you seen people who engage in these ascetic type of practices as a means towards holiness by becoming more spiritual than body? Is that something you've experienced?
I think if I see that, and even in myself, what it is it's looking at fasting and trying to and in misinterpreting the need and purpose of fasting. I think sometimes the way that we have lived our lives and grown up is, well, it's like you're trying to make up a deficit. I want to be more spiritual, so to make up for that deficit of my lack of spirituality, I'll just go through this uncomfortable experience or pain to counteract my lack of spiritual maturity, I guess is what I think happens. And it's kind of a sneaky dualism that I think...
well, and you're just talking about pure works-based religion.
Right, which
is every religion but Christianity. And of course, lots of Christians fall into it. The temptation will always be towards Pharisaism. The temptation will always be to be the person who says, I'm giving this much money, I fast every week, I follow all the laws, I do all this, look at me and see how holy I am and how spiritual I am.
Yeah.
That's always a tendency.
I think even if you're not, I think Pharisaical, when I think of Pharisaical faith, I guess you would call it, maybe faith, what you're trying to do is you're trying to impress those on the outside. Even when I'm not trying to impress others, I might be trying to impress God, I guess. I guess that's probably the closest thing I would say to trying to impress.
So walk me through this.
Okay.
Because there's a line here. What is the difference between trying to impress God and doing things because you love him?
I think because I'm trying to get something for myself, I'm trying to impress God and thinking that by creating this, this, I guess, reducing this deficit of my sin through the faith or the works-based faith, or works-based religion, by creating this deficit where I deprive myself of some comfort or joy, I am earning God's benevolence.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily for people outside, but it's in a way I have faith, but I'm misplacing. I don't have love.
Yeah.
It's faith without love.
Right. So it's kind of one of these, if I speak with the tongues of men and angels but don't have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal, right?
Right.
If I
Even in your
know
relationship with
all
God.
prophecies and all these things, if I've done all these works but I'm not doing them in love, my heart isn't right.
Right.
Then they're meaningless to me.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that's true. And they're meaningless to God, right? That's not what he's looking for. He's not pleased with sacrifices for that purpose or with that heart.
Right.
And of course, yeah, I agree. I don't know what I would say for the person who's like, oh man, this is really hard because, now I've got to sit there and question my motives when I fast or when I spend time praying or reading my Bible or doing these spiritual disciplines. I got to say, is this really because I'm trying to please God or I'm trying to make up for sin, or is it really because this is what I would say. Don't beat yourself up. Instead, just ask yourself a simple question as you walk into a practice like fasting or praying or any other spiritual discipline. Am I doing this because the love I have for Christ is compelling me to want to grow closer to him? And I see this as a way to draw closer to God by sacrificing, by presenting my body as a living sacrifice and using self-discipline in this way. Am I doing that as a love offering to God so that I can grow closer? Not because I'm saying my body is bad, not because I'm trying to make up for sin, because that's done. That's done at the cross. But because I'm compelled by my love for Christ. If you can answer that question, yes, or even change your answer from whatever it was to yes in that moment, then I think you've redeemed the action that you're doing. If you're definitely like, no, I just feel really bad because I did this sin, and instead of believing that the cross was sufficient for it, I want to somehow make up for it, then you're on the wrong page. It's kind of like, look, I used to do a decent amount of criminal law. I don't really anymore. But there was a time when I represented, and it was all defense. I was never a prosecutor. That wasn't really my bent. And some people are like, oh, defense attorneys are the worst. And you're probably right. But in any case,
just wait.
I think that there's a feeling with some defendants where it's like, let me just pay my debt. As though spending 30 days in jail is going to make what you did right, rather than as a retributive thing that brings you back into community with your community, brings you back into relationship with your community as a retributive thing. Instead, it's like, I've actually paid for this harm that I've caused. Well, you can't pay for a harm. It doesn't work. There's nothing you could ever do. If you come and punch me in the face, right? And because you're angry with me.
Are we acting this out?
No, we're not going to act this out. It doesn't play well for a podcast. If it was on TV, I'd let you do it.
Okay.
If you punch me in the face and then you go to jail for 5 days, what does that do to alleviate the suffering you've caused for me, or the future suffering, or me being afraid now of people, or whatever, right? You mug me, you do whatever. I'm going to carry that with me. You can't make it go away because you spent 5 days in jail. So you haven't paid your debt by the self-discipline of taking your freedom away for 5 days, right?
Right.
What you've done in that process is more about what you've done between you and the community as a retributive punishment to come back into community with the people who you live around, right? Mm-hmm. That's why it wouldn't be David Robinson versus Hunter Croft in the criminal case. It would be the state of Washington versus Hunter Croft, because who you're really paying the price to is the people of the state of Washington. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I know we're kind of getting off, but it's important because what we're doing when we're getting forgiveness from God is actually dealing with the nature of the sin that cannot be undone other than by the ultimate sacrifice that Christ made for us. And so it's only the cross that because he's the only one who's going to make everything new. In his resurrection, he's showing that he's going to make everything new. And because of that, you are saying, by putting it at the cross, that you're trusting God, that he's going to make it new, that he's going to restore to the person that you've harmed what can be restored, because you could never do it, and certainly not by going to jail, and certainly not by fasting or beating yourself up with a stick or self-immolating, setting yourself on fire, or the different things that people do for protest or for holiness or for whatever. That will never do it. Mm-hmm. You cannot do it by destroying the body. You cannot ever make up for the thing that you've done. And so if that's the mindset behind your spiritual disciplines, you have the wrong mindset. Mm-hmm. And so, but it is definitely a common one. And again, it's a worldview issue. It's a lack of the church doing its job in shepherding and discipling people and teaching them what repentance is about. Penance in the Catholic Church is a different issue. We could talk about that sometime. That I think really leads people to thinking that they can say X number of Hail Marys, do this, do that, and that's the penance that you pay. But even in the Catholic Church, I seriously doubt that penance is what's paying for your sin, right? I don't think that even there theologically, I don't think they would say that, or at least an educated Catholic, I don't think would say that. Nevertheless, it would lead the average person to think that somehow by doing these things, you can work your way back into God's graces. No, you have God's grace. You're already, if you're in Christ, if you're a believer, if you've called on his name for salvation, you're already justified. You're already sanctified. You're already seated in the heavenly places. It's done. And so when you sin, you put that at the cross, just like you put everything before that moment of believing in Christ and receiving his salvation before the cross. And that is what pays for it. The other stuff we do as an attempt, or as an act of love, to grow closer to our Father, to grow closer to Jesus, to live in the Holy Spirit, and to hear from him and understand what's going on and whatever. That's why we do those things. It has nothing to do with the body being bad, and it has nothing to do with paying for things. But these are, as you've pointed out, I think very common among believers. And hopefully a conversation like this will set some people free from some of that. Right. Understanding grace, you just can't live as a Christ follower for very long without understanding grace, or you're just going to be in pain all the time. If I thought I had to pay for my sin, if I thought I had to pay for my sin, I would not think that fasting could do it. I would think that death maybe, but that's the closest thing that I could imagine. Right. So, I don't know. I don't know. You went to, one of the reasons I asked you the question about seeing people like do the ascetic things, because you went to a Bible college, right? And I could just see like a pure Bible college. Like I went to a Christian college, but it was a liberal arts school. It was a university. You went to a Bible college, right, where like basically everybody there was looking to engage in ministry at some level. And so I'm just wondering, did some of the students kind of fall into some of these practices where it was like, hey, we spent all night praying last night, or I've been fasting for this many days or whatever, as an attempt to like show you or to think that they were achieving some sort of holiness by denying the body and acting like the body or the desires or whatever were evil.
I'm sure it happened, but it wasn't out there. It wasn't obvious. I had a close friend who, he got rid of his mattress in his dorm room, and he didn't have a pillow. He didn't have a mattress. He had like a blanket that he laid. He had one blanket that he laid on top of his, basically box spring, bed frame, and then a blanket that he put over him, and that was all he slept with. And he had like just super minimal, he's planning on going into overseas missions, and so that was really his motivation.
This was like a preparation for missions.
Yeah. And so that probably looked closest to what you're describing, but I don't think that was his motivation. I think his motivation was.
I'm like totally the opposite from this guy, because for me, like if you're going on a diet and it's going to be like a serious diet, you're really going to be denying yourself. You're right up to the second that you start that diet. It's like, dude, get me more Oreos and ice cream, right? Like, I'm about to really suffer. So the last thing I'm going to do is prepare for a diet by dieting.
Right.
And the last thing I'm going to do is prepare for the mission field by not enjoying every last second I get with the very best mattress I could possibly get.
And here you are.
And here I am. You don't see me on the mission field. Right. I mean, I do go and do missions, but they're short term, right? I'm coming back to my mattress. But if God called me to that, maybe I would. I don't see that as an attempt to create holiness in your life so much as a true preparation, just like school is preparing you for. I mean, it makes sense,
right?
You don't want to show up in Africa or the Middle East or wherever you're going and end up like not physically prepared for it,
right?
So I guess,
and
that
I'm
makes sense.
sure. I haven't asked him this particular question, but I'm sure there are times where you can say, oh yeah, I was kind of getting in, I kind of got up on myself. I thought highly of myself because I was doing this, cause we'd all go, where's your mattress, dude? Yeah. I've been sleeping without it for like a month now. I'm like, dude, that's crazy. And I'm sure like he had to kind of like I'm sure he would have to hold that back. There's no way you wouldn't be able to.
You going to tell us his name so we can shout out to him or not?
Sure, David Hamilton.
David Hamilton.
Yeah, he's from
way to go.
He's not far, or he grew up not far from here. He grew up like at the base of Mount Rainier, basically.
Well, the guy who just died in that island. We talked about it some time back.
Yeah,
he's from around here too.
Yeah.
So
my friend David, I was just talking to him a while ago, and he was telling me where he was thinking possibly of going. But yeah, he's going to do Bible translating.
Is he still sleeping without a mattress?
I have no idea. I want to know.
See, I would have gone to him. I would have been like, dude, where's your mattress? And he would have been like, I'm sleeping without it. I'd be like, that's cool. Can I have it so I could have two mattresses?
Yeah, I think someone did have two mattresses.
That's definitely what I would have done. I would have been like, hey, I don't care. I don't think any higher of you for not sleeping with a mattress, but I will take it so I can have two.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just, I guess I'm just a terrible person. But, I would take the extra mattress. He's not going to use it, right?
Right.
So anyway.
Is it stealing?
We'll see when he gets married if his wife wants to sleep on a box spring with a blanket.
Yeah.
That's,
well, and it's funny. He always had buzz cuts, and then he was dating a girl for a while, and he started growing his hair out, and he had nice hair, and then they aren't together anymore. And
women have a way of making making men more reasonable, because they're more reasonable than us. Sometimes we're just kind of ridiculous. Like, just grow your hair out. Come on. Anyway, no, good for David Hamilton. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Good for David Hamilton.
He's actually been here before, but you didn't see him.
Oh, well.
We filmed a video right over there.
Yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah. Anyway.
I don't know if the podcast listeners care, but David was here at some point, so he didn't sleep here though. So the mattress thing isn't really appropriate. I think that what I want to leave everybody with is, think about whether or not this mind-body dualism, this soul, spirit versus body, this type of thing, personhood in your mind is connected to just your soul and your spirit and not to your body. That if there's anything in your life where you don't see your body as part of who you are as a person, because that needs to be corrected if you're going to understand who you are. Do you want to understand who God is and who you are? You need to understand that you are a unified whole of body, soul, spirit. Yes, it is true that we live in a fallen world and that therefore your physical body has been affected by that, but that doesn't mean that it's not good, that it wasn't made to be very good, and that it won't be renewed and redeemed to be very good. And enjoy your life. It does not make you more holy to be a person who never does anything fun. It just makes you not very much fun. Did I say very much? Not very much fun. And you don't want to be not very much fun. I mean, we, here at Acts Church, and I hope at your church, if you're listening to this and you go to a different church, we value having fun, enjoying life, laughing, doing things that are exciting, doing things that are adventurous, like enjoy what God has given you. There's enough work. You do lots of work. We're all doing lots of work. There's lots of pain. There's lots of difficulties. We have people that we know that pass away. We have people that go through cancer. We have people whose marriages we have all kinds of things. We have enough to deal with in this fallen world without also on top of that, not enjoying life because we think that holiness is wrapped up in denying the body every pleasure. Enjoy pleasures in the way that God has intended them to be enjoyed, but don't deny yourself them. Seek out enjoying life. Now, having said that, don't be an idiot either. Don't live your whole life doing nothing but seeking pleasure. That's also not God's will for you. We can have another podcast sometime about work and what that means and God's plan for us in work. But I want to leave you with this mind-body dualism or this soul-spirit-body dualism and let you think through it as we close here and see if it's affecting your life in any way. We may do one more where we talk about this in terms of identities, personhood identities, gender identity, sexual orientation identities, things like that, where people have gotten this backwards or mixed up because of the way the world has been telling them to live, and as a result, maybe you'll be able to see some of the problems that are caused there. So let's pray, and we'll end it there. Father, we just thank you for. Thank you for the sunshine today. I thank you for the birds we've been hearing. I thank you for the life that you've given me. I thank you for sex. I thank you for food. I thank you for walking in a trail. I thank you for golf and disc golf. I thank you for swimming pools and family reunions and Christmas dinners and all the things that we just enjoy in life. I thank you that you give us so many things that give us joy. And I pray that you would give us the strength and the courage and the ability to walk through the difficult things in life, Lord. But we thank you that you have made this world good and that you've made us very good. And we are sorry that it's broken, and we want to see you redeem it. And we want to see your kingdom and your church push back the darkness, Lord, and be a light, not a light that's underneath something, but a light that's set high for other people to see. And I pray people will be drawn to you, Jesus, as a result of all the good things that you've made, and that they would take hold of the truth that they are a integrated whole person, body, soul, spirit, and that they would honor their bodies as well as their soul and spirit as who they are, Lord, and that we would honor each other, each one of us made individually and special and unique, Lord. And I pray that you would show us who we are in you, and that you would grow us in our gifts, our talents, our abilities, Lord. I pray that our spiritual gifts would become clear, and that we would walk in them, and we would walk in your will. We pray for those today who need prayer, who are suffering, who are struggling, who have had deaths in the family, who have sickness going on, who have financial problems, who have marital problems, relationship problems in school. Whatever it is, Lord, we just pray that you would give them strength, encouragement, and the ability to push forward. In your name, amen.